Welcome to Punchy by Rival, where we take the gloves off to share the hard-hitting realities of the challenger marketing world. Each week, we'll break down the buzz, cut through the BS, the top stories and trends to tell you what you really need to know and do differently to grow your brand and career. All right, we are live. Oh man, I was just going to say this week I did the transition. God, I'm cursed. Anyway, here we are, Mr. Jim Marous. It's so great to see you. Thanks again. And as always, for making the time. I think my only concern is even when you and I have an hour, we run out of time so quickly. And now we only have half an hour and you get a chance to meet and chat with Jenna and Dubose. So I think that's the only problem, is that we've now got 29 minutes to jam, but I'm sure it'll be fun.
Got to remember the word punchy.
There you go. Short and sweet and punchy. So it turns out I am the one in the Outback Steakhouse booth this week, and it is hot in here. It's been hot in London, and there is no air circulation because I closed the door to keep the noise out. So we'll see if I make it. But Jenna, how you doing?
I'm great. I have an air conditioner literally right above me, so I'm having a really great time. It's I have it set on 68 because I don't care about the planet, I guess, right now. So I'm having a great day.
Is that your dog or somebody else's dog?
That's mine.
That's your okay. Dubose, is your dog going to make an appearance from New York?
Queso's back in London. So unfortunately, it's just me in this blurred background of a Depression era themed hotel room. So very exciting.
Ancient, old you.
Exactly. Jen is referencing the idea. I turned 40 yesterday, and
the idea that you turned 40. You did turn 40 yesterday.
I haven't accepted it yet. I haven't accepted the fact it's happened yet.
Oh, it's just a conceptual turn 40 yesterday.
The passage of time has gotten me to 40, but in practice, who knows?
Welcome to your 5th decade.
That's it. Oh gosh, I didn't even think about it like that. Thanks, Jim.
You just triggered Dubose having an existential crisis on this episode of the podcast.
Go have a cry now.
Yeah.
After the show, Dubose. After the show.
Exactly.
All right.
Existential dread afterwards. Marketing now. Got you.
There you go. That should be the slogan, actually. Come to think of it, we need a slogan for Rival. I know we've been working through that, so we'll put that on the table. There's no bad ideas, right? Cool. So we've got 3 stories and 1 grab bag article to get to today. So we are going to cover an article from Mr. Jim Marous on the financial brand of 6 secrets to how WeBank outperforms every digital bank. We are going to cover how AI is changing marketing for consumer brands, an article from Yahoo Finance, and I think opens up a whole other dimension to the conversation of marketing that I think a lot of people aren't fully on top of, how that's going to change things. And then lastly, we're going to cover what the American Data and Privacy Protection Act means for marketing. And if we get to it, we're going to talk about how Wordle is being turned into a board game. So let's kick things off. Jim, obviously I'm going to start with you because it's your article. And I know that you have studied, visited, really gotten under the hood of how WeBank has done its thing over the last few years. So I know this article, which we'll link to in the show notes, covers a lot about the technology, the market, everything about how they've grown and how they've outperformed every other digital bank. But I'd be curious to get your perspective on the marketing and the brand side of things from WeBank.
Well, honestly, WeBank is a unique organization. A lot of what they do plays off their communication app, WeChat. So, part of that branding really works together. But overall, their branding is very subtle, but very obvious in that it is completely anti-big bank. The fact that they built from scratch as a digital financial institution, and they have such extraordinary efficiencies and focus on innovation, that kind of is the brand. The fact that they can meet the needs of any consumer at any level of the social economic stratus and serve them efficiently and effectively is pretty cool. Now, it's primarily a lending platform. I mean, that's how they really started their whole thing, that they can give you small loans over a short period of time to finance, let's say, a phone or something of that nature. And what's interesting is those small dollar elements, those small dollar transactions done at scale makes it so they're extraordinarily efficient. I referenced the fact that, they generate around, $30 to $40 a household a year, which is not anywhere near what the US can do. Sometimes it's much lower than that, but they're delivering it at 40 cents a household. So, again, Henry Ma, who I interviewed for the podcast and also did reference in the article, says with this kind of efficiency and scale, you can do a lot. And what they do, they also drive innovation at about, a 10-day transition from ideation to implementation. So those two things together, the way they do business is really the way they brand, and marketing becomes just an outshoot of that. No real marketing in a formal sense, but because of the solutions they offer, word of mouth gets them where they are. They grew by about 40% in the last 2 years. They're up to 300 million customers.
Dubose, any thoughts from you on the brand side for WeBank?
I mean, I think Jim raises a really, really excellent point, which is I think a lot of the time people assume that brand has to do the maximalist kind of lifting of things. It needs to be all singing, all dancing. And I think, I love the point you raised there, where actually use is going to be the best element of the brand here. The idea of providing value in a clear way, understanding what platforms people are on, understanding a very clear value proposition. You don't need a lot of things around that. You need distinct kind of structures. You need things that represent that. But fewer, bigger, better when there's value behind it is going to punch hard. And I think this is a very, very clear example of that.
It's interesting also, half their staff are engineers. So all of a sudden you're saying, you know what? If you're doing something extraordinarily well to a market that's well-defined, which is the anti-bank market, it's the people that aren't being served well by traditional banks, you are going to get scale because there's always going to be those underserved consumers. And if you're the financial institution, you're going to get the market share that you need.
I think it's such a great point you raised there that, I think it's interesting a lot of the time that engineering, and as someone who used to program, I don't think I'll anger the engineers that much by saying engineering sometimes gets a bad rap because it's a solution in search for a problem. It's back to the idea of we can do this, so we will, not because we should. And I think a lot of the time, exactly as you say there, when there's a very clear definition within an organization of the challenge that a brand and a business is focused on, and everyone is pulling in the direction to providing use and a solution to that challenge, you get amazing results. And I think that's where, it's funny. I think people sometimes have a visceral reaction to more than half of the organization as engineers. But you go in a sense where those engineers are moored towards a real use case and a real need that they're solving. That is an incredibly valuable team.
Jenna, you looked like you had a hand that you were about to throw. You're on mute.
You're on mute, so it's just the hand.
Very animated,
right now.
very
No
animated,
words.
but very silent.
It was very silent. I was trying to make sure that we didn't hear my fire alarm doorbell again and freak Jim out. I definitely think that there's like lessons that we can take from this. Again, like to your point about like, half the company being engineers, and that, that's been a big contributing factor of like how they've been able to ideate and get products into production like very quickly, and that's really important. How many lessons can we really draw from a place where it's like, oh yeah, like they managed to get the scale where it's like, one, I'm sure that their customer acquisition cost of 40 cents is probably boosted by the fact that since they own WeChat, I guarantee you that they're getting major discounts on essentially ad space and their acquisition costs from WeChat, and that it is easy to get scale in a market of 1 billion people. I think actually that the bigger lessons to take from these guys was, like I say, is the ABCD philosophy, like kind of the AI, like the cloud computing, like, and a couple other things that they had here. Because I don't know how many lessons I really take from the like, yes, like all you have to do is get your acquisition costs down to uncompetitively low levels that have come by essentially monopolizing the chat and communications functions of an entire country, and then you make those people your bank customers. I don't know. They're definitely doing amazing things, and I don't want to malign again like the incredible work of some of these folks. I just think that the lessons lie in slightly different places from my POV.
It's interesting though, because I've always wondered why, I'll take the US as an example, why there's never been a great financial services inroads using the telcos, because it's the same stuff. If you have the data and you have scale, you take any of the 3 major telcos in the US or 4, depends on which way you want to play it. The reality is those provide extraordinarily market capabilities and capacities. But again, I don't need 300 million customers. But on the other hand, if I'm not setting myself apart, it's not not gonna make a difference.
Well, I mean, isn't that like that's the big thing? Like in Africa, actually, is the telcos own huge portions of the banking system in like large parts of Africa. Isn't that the case, right? Where it's like they essentially skipped like large portions of like our financial system development and did go into majority like telco provided like banking services, which is interesting. Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, I thought the cool thing, like I say, was more around again on the efficiency of their product launches. It's maybe that's a little bit easier when you have a 996 like culture. I don't really know, but I do. But again, I think that there are like, viable lessons there about how you manage and integrate like tech and products into your business, that those were really interesting to me, I thought.
Well, and the culture is all around innovation. It doesn't matter if you're an engineer or anything else. The fact is every single person is looking for the ways to solve a customer problem. I was lucky enough to be there and see 4 parallel cloud computing platforms running at the same time, 2 of them for testing products. And they're not afraid of failure. That's what's really cool too. And mind you, the economics make that a little bit more possible. But if something doesn't work for a customer base, they take it out. They say, okay, thank you very much. We're going to get rid of this, but we're moving forward, which is really a cultural mindset in China as well. They aren't the only organization that continually innovates and is willing to fail and get rid of something in order to move forward. It also shows that there's so much capacity for a targeted digital bank in all of our countries. And ones that can do this stuff so efficiently well by not thinking like your traditional bank.
I mean, that kind of testing and rapid product failure is, again, one of the things that we see from really successful brands like Taco Bell, who our dedicated listeners will remember, limitedly tested the giant Cheez-It in one market. And then when it did well, they've pulled it back. And that culture of innovation, very important.
Yeah.
I think this could be the moment that Taco Bell Bank becomes a thing, because if there's anyone ready to diversify and get a larger footprint in my life, I want my mortgage to come from Taco Bell. I want that to happen.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to move us on, because typically it's not to the end of the episode that we start talking about Taco Bell, but I think Dubose is hungry. So, second story from Yahoo Finance, how AI is changing marketing for consumer brands. So, I will be honest with you. I basically took this for the headline more than the actual story. Go read it if you want, but I just kind of wanted to tee up the conversation, unless anybody did find anything that interesting within the article, just around how we see AI changing marketing now and where we think it's going to go. And I'll just tee it off by saying, and I know this is maybe too broad of a point to be all that relevant, but I just think people are tremendously underestimating the impact that AI is going to have. And it's, I always think of that quote, the future's already here. It's just not evenly distributed yet. And there are plenty of ad tech, creative tech agencies, brands that are already using a ton of AI in their marketing efforts. It's still relatively early. But if you think about particularly the advertising and the services side of this industry, so much of it is being done manually by humans. And I think technology is going to replace a lot of that. And I know when we debate that with kind of the more creatively oriented among us, there's technology, computers can never replace what humans do on the creative side. And that might be true to a certain extent. It might be true for a while, but I think eventually, software is going to eat the world, and it's certainly going to eat this part of our industry. Dubose, I'll start with you. Thoughts?
So I think there's one thing from the article that stood out to me. I whenever I read these things, it was seeing things like personalization being written across is interesting. And I think, the thing for me that's intriguing here is personalization is a watchword for me in the same way artificial intelligence is, in that I don't think it's a useful application or term for how we use it in the industry. I agree with you. AI is going to provide lots of useful benefits for marketers and already is. But I think there's a problem sometimes that we talk about the word and not the use case, that we're fetishizing that actually the technology one day in the future, barring an actual singularity, is going to completely change the way we do things, versus the idea that actually a lot of the time it's gradual application of it. And I think to that point, the use for AI isn't to say, hey, we've integrated AI into the organization. It's the use cases that creative agencies, media agencies are already finding every day. I mean, it's funny, if you want to get really semantic about it, a lot of the time it's machine learning, not AI. It's down to the idea that you're not getting proactive suggestion. You're getting kind of analysis at scale to find different connections between data in a way that's going to power, greater efficiencies in media or greater creativity. I think one of the things I find really interesting is, to your point, the more creatively leaning amongst us in the industry, kind of saying a robot will never take my job, kind of ignore the idea that actually, I don't think the goal is to completely replace people with kind of algorithms. Instead, algorithms are just going to be a different thing that empowers creative directors, empowers copywriters to look at the different areas they could go to, the different territories they could consider. In the same way that cigarettes and beer powered the creative industries in the 70s in the UK, I imagine artificial intelligence can have the same impact on creativity in 2020. It's just down to the idea of exploring what's out there, looking at the different possibilities that you can generate against, and then taking the best of those and putting them forward. But there'll always be a symbiosis between the people in the industry and the tools available to us. And AI is just another one of those tools.
Jenna?
Dubose, I'm going to say that I think that you didn't read past the first 3 paragraphs of this article, because they do go into very specific use cases about machine learning and some of these instances around recommendation engines and a couple other things. So I am going to call you out. I realized that yesterday was your birthday, but I do think that you didn't read past several paragraphs of this.
I live my life by when I see personalization, I stop reading an article and go take a walk for 5 minutes.
That's a good rule to live by, honestly, because I agree with you that I think it's like, also, again, had you read through the whole article, you would have realized that this is a paid placement by this like growth channel like agency that essentially like paid.
I mean, you can tell that in the first sentence.
You can tell, but you can definitely tell when you get all the way down in the last paragraph of it. And I'm like, who the fuck are these guys? Who the fuck is growth channel? Who the fuck are these people? Which may be why, like it's written where it's like to Dubose's very correct point. They're talking about machine learning. They're not talking about AI. All the use cases that they're talking about are machine learning. But I don't know. I mean, we've talked about this like internally, where I'm like, hey, I really think that sometime within the next like 5 years, like the concept of like media planning, and I don't know, it's definitely, I don't think it's gonna be the same like on brain planning, but increasingly media planning or like media placements is really just gonna be, professionals, like media professionals who understand how to direct machine learning algorithms towards like business goals in the best possible way, where it's not necessarily, I think, gonna be so about like, it is, of course, going to be some about like the strategy of like where consumers are or whatever else, but where I think that like tactical superiority in like, media buying before was a little bit about like kind of Excel skills and kind of, being able to do like basic regressions. Increasingly, media buying, like excellence in media buying is going to look like, do we understand how to deploy the correct machine learning algorithms in the correct places to get these types of outcomes? So it is really important. But I think, we were talking to a friend of Rival yesterday, and who's got some business with a startup AI that's now starting to build AI for kind of like edge case or like more niche applications, like outside of the standard ones that we do now, where it's like not just recommendation engines or a couple other things, but like what exactly do farmers in Kansas, where could AI benefit them? Where are the daily tasks or whatever else that we could introduce AI? And I think that in marketing, it's increasingly getting to that point where it's like just more and more tasks are going to start to be those types of things that are subject to machine learning and kind of everything else. But I will say that the one thing that was omitted from this, and this is, I know that I sound like a stick in the mud when I'm the person that talks about this all the time, concerns about writing or directing ethical AI are completely absent from this. And everyone who listens to this should go by Reed Blackman, PhD, Reed Blackman's book called Ethical Machines, on how to develop ethics frameworks around your AI and machine learning in your organization. I'm not on commission. It's just a really good book. And he's a philosophy guy. So,
it's interesting. My frustration with the whole AI thing is we keep on talking about what can be done. I mean, there's not an article that doesn't talk about what can be done. When are we going to start seeing what really is being done? Now, there are those outliers, but in the financial services industry, AI is almost entirely still being used for risk management. And why is that? Because anything that looks bad, the bank, highlights. On the other hand, because of the risk avoidance mentality, when you start talking about the opportunity for AI and machine learning and contextual engagement and future plans, what happens is all of a sudden the bank starts killing themselves, because what they do is to say, well, yeah, that's true, it could be, but what about that one person that AI misidentified? Screw it. It's not, but the problem is, it's the difference between a traditional financial institution and a fintech. The difference between risk management and risk avoidance. As long as there's risk avoidance, AI is never going to get headway in the personalization world, because everybody's afraid about that miscategorization. I'm tired of getting the emails from my bank that says, dear Jim, thanks for being a small business customer. And after that, it's offering me shit I already have, or targeting me with something that makes no sense, but never targeting who I really am. On the other hand, because the data is available, PayPal does it regularly and does it relatively well. But all these articles talk about the power of AI and the power of machine learning, power of predictive analytics, all these things. Okay, I agree with all that. Show me true implementation cases, certainly in the financial services industry, and they're minor. And even when I'm interviewing the big banks on the Bank and Transform podcast, the reality is even they admit we're not really there yet. People give us a whole lot more credit than we really deserve. And the problem is the culture kind of kills the enthusiasm toward it. And we get into the get rid of the people that aren't like this, as opposed to let's target the people that are like this.
I think there's something really interesting there, especially when we talk about banking and data and AI. In the 3 paragraphs of the article I read, they started to raise some interesting points on it about this. But I think banking is one of those sectors where I think the value exchange between what brands know about consumers and what they're providing is wildly, wildly off. And I think something like AI can start to close that gap. It's so funny because there are other sectors that do it really well. Like I always love the theory of kind of the Eric Schmidt creepy line, where it's like you can be so personal, but there's a certain point where it starts to become a bit creepy and not useful. And
it's value transfer, though. I put all these indicators out that Wells Fargo, I'm going to call them out on this one. They came to me and said, what's the balance level you'd like us to set as your minimum so that we'll warn you when your balance is low? I'm going, shit, you've had my account for 17 years. You know by day what my minimum balance has to be because you know when the tuition is due. You know when the car payment is due. You know when the mortgage is due. Don't ask me something that you probably know better than I do. And you said it. The difference between the gap between what they can do and what they will do is extraordinary. Why doesn't every bank in the U.S. offer Acorns, an automated investment platform to help me build my savings based on my balance levels? Because they're worried they're going to make them get back down to risk avoidance thing. And it's frustrating because if I went to any bank that I work with and said, tell me everything you know about me, I'd probably be scared by all they know. How much do they deploy? And not just deploy on the communication basis, but democratize the data and insights across the organization so that everybody I can come in contact with understands me. It can be done. It's just, again, the future, not the current.
I will say also like the last thing to this point, Jim, about like how you want like banks or whoever to to personalize like the interactions that they have with you. I will say like one of the other things that really grinds my gears about this article is like this really like constant thing that I see where it's like they report the 70 or 80% of people want customized experiences, therefore personalized ads are acceptable and like people want those. What they conveniently leave out is that actually people want exactly what you said, Jim, is that they want companies to personalize how they directly interact with the customer based on data that they've disclosed, but that everyone hates the idea of third parties being sold their data or that they're being online surveilled, and that consistently it's 80% of people hate that and do not feel that the experience of targeted advertising is worth that trade-off in data. So I really hate that they've mangled the statistics on this, and that more places should be spending a lot more time, like I said, thinking about like personalization within their customer experience, which is so much broader than just their targeted advertising. Fucking keep the shit out of targeting ads.
I love Hulu and Netflix. I hate DirecTV. Hulu and Netflix helps me decide what I should watch next. DirecTV makes me figure out what I want to record, and I record the good and the bad. In the same way that I like personalization from Amazon and what they help me find without any effort, I hate that when I look at something on Instagram, that damn company and everyone like it follows me on Facebook and Instagram. You know what? It's a balancing act. Earn my trust, earn my loyalty, and you aren't going to keep on putting it up there and have me act on it if I'm not interested. And yet it's kind of like going, okay, what can I put to replace that? Because I'm tired of looking at shoes. Maybe I want to look at cars, and so I'll start saying, geez, I want to look at a car, and then they'll start feeding me cars instead.
I do. I manipulate my algorithm for it to show me the stuff I want. 100% I do. Absolutely. That's a big thing. Manipulate my algorithm because it's like, oh, I want to see something different right now.
AI.
it all comes down to value at the end of the day. I mean, that's
Oh,
the
yeah.
big takeaway for me from this conversation is like, if there are ways to deliver more value through Dubo's earmuffs personalization or AI/machine learning, then that's always going to lead to more value creation for the business and the brand. I am going to move us on because we only have 5 minutes to cover our last story. And it looks like we are not going to get to talk about how Wordle is becoming a board game. Dubo's, I know when your birthday is next year. So it sounds like a pretty good birthday gift for a 41-year-old.
I will just go ahead and hop in on that one and say they've invented Hangman. You've invented Hangman. It was around 100 years ago.
Here's the thing with that story that is amazing. It nestled in there says that it took them a year to develop the game, and this was Hasbro's fastest game to market.
There
It's
are
literally
vaccines that were made faster than Wordle.
Physical Wordle. I just don't understand. I don't understand the whole like challenger mindset. I don't want to open this up to conversation now because I do want to talk about the Google Analytics conversation, but the whole challenge, like the fact that it takes WeBank, what, Jim, 7 to 10 days to launch a new product, and it takes the New York Times and Hasbro a year.
Because you have committees meeting and meetings
God.
to go over how to do that.
I will say, and now we're just actually talking about this article, I will say the shout out that I want to give, and we had David Rubin on Scratch, the CMO at the New York Times. I do kind of see them thinking and acting a little bit more like a challenger these days. The whole acquisition of Wordle, the fact that they're diversifying into more and more, I think subscription revenue is now, I don't want to get the stat wrong. It's probably in the article here. 40% of overall sales is now subscription revenue. Like they are kind of reinventing themselves. They're kind of challenging themselves in the industry, the acquisition of The Athletic as well. So I think they're a really interesting case study that are few and far between of incumbent businesses that are thinking and acting like challengers. Okay, so last story, and we only got 3 minutes to do it. So let's talk fast, but I know this group can do that. From Marketing Dive, what the American Data and Privacy Protection Act means for marketers. So there's a bipartisan bill that aims to create a comprehensive national data privacy framework, focusing on a robust set of consumer privacy rights. And also, I totally just realized I forgot to give it points. I haven't given any points out this whole episode.
We all suck.
Oh, man, amazing. 1,000,000 points for everybody. Anyway, so it serves as the U.S. equivalent to GDPR, a European law on data protection and privacy that serves as the golden standard. I don't know about that for privacy compliance. Jenna, what say you to the American Data Privacy Protection Act?
It's never gonna pass. It's never gonna pass. Nothing's gonna happen in this country. We're dying under political gridlock. I don't know. I'm having a really hard time separating my like millennial anxiety about social and civil collapse from this article. Honestly, like I think it's a really good starting place. I think we just need something. We need something. Like if for no other reason than having a patchwork of California having the CCPA and like other, like I'm sure that New York's going to introduce something, for no other reason than we just need a national framework for this. But I just don't see any way that this I don't know.
We can't agree on what color the sky is. I mean, the reality is, this is too deep for politicians that can't see, will not agree on anything for the sake of not agreeing on anything.
And I think Congress has gotten better. Like when you look at, the first time Zuck got called to testify and like the second time he got called to testify, clearly the congressional aides were working overtime on the second time Zuck testified. And so they weren't like when, what's the Google CEO's name when they were asking about like the iPhone? I'm so passionate about this. I really am, but I'm really having a tough time reconciling oh my God, the United States is a dystopian hellhole right now. Women have no rights in half of the country. Yeah, let's pass comprehensive data protection from a government that spies on us aggressively. I don't know. This is a very fatalistic take. This is not.
There's room for improvement, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
So it's a good start, but it could get better, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think I agree with Jenna on at the broad range of things we just covered. I would say, one of the things that strikes me is it really does underscore the value of what the EU did with GDPR. getting a lot of people across a lot of, different countries, different situations to understand the value for this, to empower consumers to start to push back on what they do with their data, to take, the values that you normally only saw in countries like Germany when it came to internet privacy, and exploiting those throughout the multinational group is really, really, really impressive. And I tend to think that, the sophistication of legislation it took to do that, the upskilling it took of lawmakers to understand that, and the education effort it took within the EU to get this across the line shows that it's going to take a while in the US. I think it does show the value.
How old is that privacy law in the UK?
Oh gosh, I gotta remember.
2016.
Yeah, so it's 5 to 7 years, which explains why it happened. It could not take place today. I'm just
in the EU, it absolutely could. It absolutely could.
You think it still could?
Yes, I absolutely think it could.
In Europe,
yes.
Yeah.
I think, in a world where Brexit has kind of, diverted the EU's discussion for a few years, I think something like GDPR would almost be a welcome respite. It would be like, great, let's just chat about internet privacy for a while. I mean, I think, the interesting thing is, I am a fan of what they've done with GDPR, not just because I tend to label everything in my life a GDPR violation to see if someone will fix it. But it's really down to the idea that it showed change on two levels. It got consumers to think differently about how they opt into things, and it changed the experience that media owners, websites, and media agencies and marketers had to think about data and how they did it to provide an experience. I think that's amazing, because seeing change on those two poles, I think, does make me feel like it would be a different piece of legislation if it came out now. It would face different enemies in the EU, but I think they could get something across the line.
It enabled open banking too. I mean, the reality is that's why open banking kind of is still a standstill in the US in the broader sense, is because the transfer of data. You got to take care of both.
I'm sure if Boris Johnson was here, he would have a folksy metaphor about good fences and good neighbors. But, he also wouldn't be allowed in a new GDPR conversation. So
aren't the conservatives trying to roll this back in the UK now that they technically are not subject to it? I feel like, isn't that one of those things that like Rishi or whatever gross, unctuous, disgusting people are in the leadership race are trying to do?
Well, depending on when this airs, it could be 5 people or 2. But
yeah, who knows?
I think, the key thing is, yes, I think there's a lot of, it was enshrined in law after the UK left the EU, but then I think there have been constant considerations about whether or not it's holding back progress of the economy. And I think, that is a distasteful argument that you have to kind of sacrifice privacy to allow businesses to succeed.
All right, so here's what we're gonna do. Here's what we're gonna do to wrap things up, since I've been a terrible host and didn't give everybody points, but now everybody has 1,000,000 points. We're gonna call it a tie. Everybody's gonna get 1 minute to do a rant or rave. Jenna, you already did one about your Read Black Men ethical AI, but I'll give you another one if you have another one queued up. I'm just kind of stalling for time. Make sure everybody has one.
I always have one, but make them go first. Make them go first.
Go first. All right.
I'll order last.
Dubose. Rant or rave. 1 minute on the clock. What you got?
So I'm going to have a rant, and I'm going to talk about age. And this is because I turned 40 yesterday, as we covered. One of the things that happened directly after I turned 40 is I got a LinkedIn notification. I got quite a few of them, and it's a separate rant about the why don't you wish someone a happy birthday on LinkedIn. I feel like it's an unusual place to do it, though I do appreciate it. Thanks to everyone who sent birthday messages. But I think the other message I thought was quite interesting is, the little sponsored news stories they have on LinkedIn. And it said how to overcome ageism in the workplace. And this was at 9:09 the day I had turned 40. And I was like, either this is the most contextual thing of all time, or there is an algorithm somewhere that has flipped a switch and has gone, now he's in a different group. Let's push all the ageism content there. And I think it really got me thinking about, the way we define different generational cohorts, the way we even build our surveys, where I think numerically we've started to construct different age ranges where we go, ooh, 25 to 40, that seems like a good one. And I think it's interesting that, I think we need to probably think a little bit differently about how we're grouping people by age, or at least hold off until one day after my birthday to serve me things like that.
Didn't this happen because the actual legal limit for age discrimination starts at 40 in the United States? That's an actual legal limit that we've established. I think it is. I think that 40 is when it's legally the first time that you're allowed to claim age discrimination. I think.
I like to think it was about me, not about the world. Exactly. And also I need to have a conversation with everyone afterwards.
Well, you know what? I was going to go on the rants I went on before we even got on the podcast about tech providers and banks, but I'm gonna double down on his rant, because you know what? Quit complaining about being 40. I don't remember 40, so screw you. And on top of that, I think I'll double down on what you said, because I continually get things as if they know who I am, and people put, as you said, they put age into a category. I am not the person that has a 30-year-old son. I am a person that has a son that just graduated from university. I am not an investor. I'm still cash flow centric, which is not a good sign. I still have a mortgage. In fact, I have double mortgages, unlike most. However, I'm as digitally adept as virtually anybody, certainly on the mobile phone. So quit telling me how to do things on a mobile phone and say, you know what, have you even tried mobile deposit capture? You know, look at the data, figure out who I really am. And oh, by the way, don't treat my wife and I similarly, because we are diametrically opposed as far as how we engage on platforms. She's much more in a personal mail, paper. I'm, screw the paper. So, wait till you get to be my age and start complaining about being 40. You're going to look back and say, God, those were the days. In fact, when I turned 50, my family gave me an 8-foot metal dinosaur to put in our yard. So basically, I have an 8-foot dinosaur behind me in my yard, and that's how they. And oh, by the way, that was one voting age away from where I am today. So that was at 50, and now add 18, and so again, you youngster, quit complaining.
Jim, I love everything about what was just said, and I want to take the first bit of that and put it on a birthday card for people. I think I'm just gonna. There's so many things that need to happen out of this. So thank you, and that is the best thing I've heard on my birthday.
What? You're not as old as me. I love it. I'm not dead. There's my best thing. I got out of bed this morning.
That's what I said.
You say your parameters differently.
Yeah, I said congratulations to Dubose for not dying again this year. That was my birthday card to Dubose. Yeah,
and I
literally
said,
the first card
really
I bought.
tried.
Yeah, well done. Good job, Dubose. Jim, I'm sorry. The really important question is, what kind of dinosaur was it?
That's what I was going to ask. And why a dinosaur?
Tyrannosaurus Rex.
That's a pretty good lawn sculpture.
It's
I feel like
that's
a
big copper dinosaur. I mean, it's a huge copper dinosaur that sits. It used to sit on the front yard when we lived in California on a hill. And now we put it in the backyard, and people look out our window and go, "Is that a dinosaur?" Let's put it this way: when we moved to this house 12 years ago, and it came out of the moving van, people all of a sudden knew, "Oh, these aren't the same kind of people that lived here before." They got a freaking dinosaur. Yeah,
the folks before had a brontosaurus. This has changed everything.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I love it.
All right, Jenna, take us home. What's your rant or rave?
Oh, I was gonna say, you just get me. Read Blackman, Ethical Machines. Buy it.
Yeah.
Great. On that punchy note, we're out for today. Jim, thanks for making the time. I'm literally about to melt in this booth right now. I really need to open this door, but very entertaining and hopefully informative for people as well. And as always, we'll see you next time. Have a good day.